Benji Anderson, welcome to the Call Room Road to Balboa, episode 2. How you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing really good. You are willing and gracious enough to record this before school, and you were telling me before the podcast started that you get first period off. What does that time before school generally look like, and how are you feeling that time most days?
So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I just have my first period off. And really I just use that time to sleep in or get any extra homework done that I need to. And then Tuesday and Thursday, we actually have morning practice at 6 a.m. So it's kind of a bummer because I don't start school till 11 on Tuesday and Thursday, but I'm up at 5:30 getting ready for practice. And then out the door by 5:45 for 6 a.m. practice. And then I'll go to practice and then I'll come home, just chill. Usually just watch some TV or YouTube or scroll on TikTok. I always say I'm going to get homework done, but that never really happens.
When you come home, you ever take long naps, or are you already awake after the morning practice, morning workout?
I always try. I think the hardest part is just I'm already awake and I was running. And then I just try and lay in bed for a little bit. It ends up being more like TikTok, Instagram scrolling time rather than taking a nap. But I don't know. At least I give it an effort.
You sound like a TikTok guy instead of Instagram Reels. How would you compare the two? Which one's better and why? Make your case.
Well, my whole argument goes back in the spring. I was I don't know, I'm not a TikTok guy at all. I was I'm gonna delete the app. But then my Instagram Reels ended up being just running, and I was all right, I want something other than just running on my feed. So I ended up getting TikTok again, and I was just looking at things, and I was all right, this is good. It's not running, so if I'm gonna spend time on my phone, something away from running is kind of nice every once in a while. So I've grown to be a TikTok guy just because it's steers away from the running part.
You're undefeated so far this season. Correct me if I'm wrong there. How do you feel? We're in October, kind of midway through the season. You're on fire. I think you're turning some heads. How's it feel to beat Benji Anderson?
Yeah, no, it feels really good. I'm super pumped. I think I'm just bringing a lot of confidence into this season, especially after last track season. It was kind of a disappointing season, and I think I'm just bringing a lot of confidence in from the early season. I think my first race back, I was not sure whether or not I was going to be healthy to race. And then ended up winning there, and I've just kind of brought that whole momentum with me.
You mentioned that track season didn't quite go as planned as you would like. How do you bounce back from a setback like that and ultimately come back how you have this season?
Well, I think the biggest thing was actually implementing another factor into my training, which was sports psychology. I was always I don't know if I need a sports psychologist or anything like that. But then I had an opportunity to work with one this summer, and it was great. It was super beneficial to me. I was able to gain a lot more confidence, especially going into the early season. And I don't know, it's just some tool that I think I'm going to take with me, especially when I'm going off to college, because it's just been so great.
What are some of the biggest ways you would say on paper that you've grown? You mentioned confidence. Are there any other aspects or things you've worked on with your sports psych that you feel like you've been able to apply, not just in your races, but also that everyday life, everyday practice?
Yeah, I think one big thing has been spiritually. I've noticed myself I don't know, I find it a lot more calming just when I can speak to God, go to church, pray every day. I think that's really helped me a lot. I know I've grown away from it a little bit over the past couple of years with COVID and everything, but I think one thing working with my sports psychologist was kind of bringing that back in my life, and I've noticed tons of improvement, especially mentally and physically.
You mentioned it sounds like a little hiccup or a little injury going into the season. Take me through that, and was that nerve-wracking at all, thinking, oh, I had this setback in track season, I might not even be able to line up for this first race?
Yeah, so well, this is funny because it was more of a breathing disorder that I had developed early January, and that one it really took a lot out of me. I was unsure of how I was going to be able to get through my spring track season, let alone what the future was going to hold for me, and I was super nervous. But I think working with that sports psychologist helped a ton, and then just honestly, just winning races really brought back a lot of confidence, and I don't know, it kind of gave me a view on what I can do in the future.
Take me through something like that where it sounds like it's obviously physical, but it's not how most runners would think of like a sore Achilles or a stress reaction or stress fracture. What's that process look like? How do you overcome something like that, on paper? I've never heard of something like that, so open my eyes. What is something like this, and how do you get on the other side of it?
Yeah. So, well, what I was diagnosed with is vocal cord dysfunction. So I'll just give you a quick rundown. It's when your vocal cord's shut in your throat, which slowly closes your throat when you're at high heart rates. So for me, that looked like it was in like races. For example, if I was going out to New Balance Nationals and I was racing Danny Simmons out there and it was hot, I would notice it like pretty quickly into a race. Whereas if I was in a local race in Colorado and we went out in like 4:45 for the first mile of a 2 mile, I didn't see it as often just because the intensity was lower, my heart rate was lower. And one thing that I really, really struggled with was just like getting back, getting healthy again, because it took a lot of like physical therapy with doctors. And thankfully, the best doctor in the country lives in Colorado. He works in Colorado. So I was able to get treatment there, which is super sweet. But basically, I just had to relearn how to breathe while I'm running. And the treatment that I've been doing throughout the summer is just going in on a treadmill with a harness, a helmet, a camera down my nose so I could see my throat opening and closing while I was running, and just practicing my breathing techniques. And it was a struggle, but it's been a long process, and I think I'm super grateful to be where I am now, where I'm toward the end of it, getting a lot healthier every single day, and I'm not struggling as much.
Getting in your mindset a little bit here and trying to understand it further, do you feel like something like that on paper, while obviously super unideal now that you've hopefully kind of figured it out, gives you a bigger chip on your shoulder in terms of like, oh, I overcame that? When you line up at Footlocker this December thinking, I had one of the harder journeys to get here almost a year ago. I was finding it hard to go on runs, race, and like, the journey here wasn't hard. And because of that, the races are more meaningful. It almost makes you dig deeper. What's your kind of mindset there with overcoming something like this? And how do you feel it, I don't know, maybe adds chip on your shoulder of having more adversity and making you that guy?
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's one thing I'm just going to take with me, and it might even be for the rest of my running career. Just because, like, everyone goes through struggles at some point in time, but you don't know how hard it is until you go through a struggle yourself. And that's something I've, like, really learned throughout all this is just, like, but I've also learned that I'm a way better runner than I previously thought. Like, I had been running fast times all season, but I think now I'm at the point where I do still have this breathing disorder. I'm still running these fast times, and I'm continuing to get better. So like you said, like I know when I toe the line in December at Boa Park, I know that not only am I one of the best guys here, but I went through a whole lot of struggle to get here, and I think that's going to carry me all the way.
Let's talk about your training specifically this summer leading into the cross season. Take me through it. I also know you were a part of, I think it was like the Junior U.S. Mountain Trail Championships. How does a race like that fit into the larger scheme of summer training and build up, where most high schoolers that you're racing have never touched a trail in their life, much less raced on one in the middle of their build up?
Yeah, so the cool thing is growing up in Colorado, I mean, we've got access to so many trails. And we're just super blessed out here to be able to go out in nature, especially in the mountains, and just run some tough trails. Because I know there's guys, for example, in like Kansas and the Midwest, like you don't really have trails, you don't have mountains out there. But I think it's super cool because one, I think it's the best part of running. It's probably the most enjoyable part for me. But two, it also builds a lot of strength. And I think that's super important going to a cross country season where it's more about how strong you can be rather than how fast you can run. Because there's courses, I mean, even for example, like the Kenosha course in Wisconsin, Footlocker Regionals one, like the first hill is 1,200 meters long. And that's the start. And if you can't get over that, then you're going to have a pretty bad race just because it's just the beginning. And then same thing at Balboa Park, you got that super steep hill. about a mile in, and then you go over it again at 4K. So I think being able to run trails is like such a great opportunity, just because we're able to build a ton of strength.
Where did your love for trails come into play? How did you get introduced to that side of the sport? It's something that, yeah, it's a very small niche of the sport of running, and very, very few people do it, much less a high schooler. So I'm so curious to hear your kind of introduction to it. Take me through that.
Yeah, so when I first started running competitively in 6th grade, my club coach, Andrew Simmons, who works for Peak Performance, he's the owner, and it was like every single run we did was on trails. It was over in Golden, Colorado, Green Mountain, Morrison area, and I just have grown up running on trails every single day. And it was just something I loved. And he had athletes in the past make junior world teams for trail running, and I always looked up to those guys, and I was like, that's something I want to do. Like, I want to wear the USA jersey, go out there, race in a different country. Like, I think that's so cool. So, spring of my freshman year in high school, he texted me. He's like, hey, like, do you want to apply for the World Mountain Team? And I was like, yeah, like, totally. Like, this is going to be so sweet. I was so pumped that I hadn't even made the team yet. So I applied, and then I got selected, and it was like the coolest thing ever. Like, I remember my doorbell rang one day, and it was like FedEx dropping off like a huge package full of USA gear with the USA suitcase, and I was so excited. And I think from that moment on, trail running is something I just completely fell in love with, and I was like, this is where I really shine. Like, this is where I just have a ton of fun out there, where I can kind of go run outside of competitiveness. So I try as much as I can to just go out on trails if I have an off day. Just go run. It's super easy, 9-minute pace, just because at that point it doesn't really matter. I'm just going there and having fun, enjoying the views. So yeah, it's just been amazing.
What did that moment of getting all that USA gear do for your confidence in terms of what you could do in the sport?
It was so surreal. I looked at myself and I was like, holy smokes. Out of all the kids in the United States right now, how many of them have made a U.S. team yet? And granted, it was in trail running, which is super uncommon, but I think I took that and I was like, wow, this is such an amazing opportunity to go represent my country. And I think it really propelled me as a runner too.
Trails, road, track, I guess grass in college, of course, but where do you view your future in the sport of running? Or is it just take it step by step?
Yeah, I think college for sure. I think it's going to be the grass, and then maybe a track 10K. I mean, I've always loved the longer distances. I kind of enjoy having some time to think in races, which I think is I don't know, pretty uncommon. A lot of people don't really like hurting super bad for a super long time. That's something I've always kind of enjoyed and taken advantage of. So I think for sure, going to take advantage of the cross, especially the 10K in college, 5 and 10K on the track. And then I think we're just going to see where that takes me. The goal is ultimately to go pro for sure. I think that would be such an amazing honor, and get paid while running, which is pretty sweet. And I think for sure stick with the longer distances in the beginning and then hopefully move up to the marathon by the end of the career.
You are a HOKA NIL athlete, one of the first to do it. I'm curious, focusing on the kind of the trail side of things. One, why in the world did you wear a speed suit? I have that exact speed suit. I can't imagine. That seemed like a mistake. And two, how cool is it to be an NIL athlete for HOKA, which is one of the shoe companies that kind of started out in trails. I remember when I was coming up in the sport, I only viewed HOKA as trail running shoes. Obviously now they've expanded and have an amazing line across kind of any need. But back in the day, it was the speed goats were that's what I knew HOKA for. How cool is it with your trail side of things to partner with a brand that, excels on the trail, not just on the road or track?
Yeah, well, I'll address the speed suit one first. I was going into the race.
Maybe I'm just hating. The drip is insane. The drip is insane. Insane aura, infinite aura, but I don't know, man.
Yeah, I was like, well, I don't know if it's going to be hot or it's going to be cold. And I was like talking to Craig, and I was just like, he's like, man, like we can get you half tights, but they're not super good. Just yet. He's like, we're working on them. Like we're going to perfect them. And I was like, all right, like I'm a big half tight guy. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to wear the speed suit. I'm going to go out here, have fun. I forgot my headband. So I was like, all right, I'm going to throw on HOKA hat too. Just go out like, I don't know if you can call it drip, but, I like to think it is. But yeah, I mean, that was so cool just to be able to represent HOKA in such a unique way. And I think it's super, super awesome to be able to represent them, not only in trail running, but also like the high school part. Because, I mean, I don't know many kids that opt to race in HOKA shoes just because everyone's like, I don't think HOKA's that great. But from my experience, like I've really, really enjoyed it a ton. I love their spikes. I love their super shoes. I love their regular training shoes too. And I honestly think the gear is really, really sweet. Like the shirts are comfortable. The shorts are amazing. And I think that's one thing that I've really I don't know, I've never branched out brand wise. I've always been like a Nike guy and a Saucony guy. And I think that was one thing that I've really taken away from this HOKA thing is like, there are some really phenomenal brands out there that if you just try them, you'll like figure out who they are. And I mean, I had the opportunity to race in non-HOKA shoes this past weekend, and I still opted for wearing the HOKA shoes just because I was like, these are just, I mean, they're unbeatable in my opinion, and they're pretty phenomenal.
I saw you wore the Rocket X2s for a race early on in the season. You won. Maybe a correlation there, maybe not. I did a lot of my marathon training in that shoe last year, and I'm unbiased. I get shoes from every single shoe company. Any shoe you can think of, I get sent to me, and they undoubtedly are some of my favorite super shoes. I've loved every single workout I've done in them. Love the rest of my HOKAs. What's your favorite HOKA shoe? And you mentioned like racing in some of the HOKAs. How cool is that to be able to race in some of these shoes?
Yeah, so my favorite shoe, I really like the HOKA Skyflow. I mean, that one, since it's come out, it's probably been my favorite shoe just for everyday training and even workouts, honestly. I've been working out in that shoe quite frequently. I always try and stay away from the carbon-plated shoes.
Really?
They mess up. Yeah.
What's the thought there?
Well, so I don't know if you've probably heard of Team Sova out in Blacksburg.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched the video, and none of those guys were super shoes. And I was like, all right, like maybe that's something I'll give it a try. And I did it, and I found my legs were a lot significantly more tired at the beginning after I'd finish a workout, and the next day they'd be pretty sore. But then as time went on, I felt that my legs were getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and I was running the same paces in my Skyflows that I was running in the Rocket X2s. So I felt like the effort, I don't know, I felt the same. It's just I noticed my legs were getting stronger as the weeks went on, and I was like, that's just I think that's just going to be a little advantage that I have over most of the guys who train in super shoes. Their legs aren't as fully developed because they're not working on different muscles. So yeah, I was just might as well take advantage of this.
Something I'm curious to ask you about is, you're a two-time Colorado State classification record holder in the freshman and sophomore 5K. So you've been really successful off the bat. And for those who aren't familiar, you run for Mountain Vista, which has a long history of success in both cross country and track and field. Can you take me through some of your early success in high school and how it's kind of led up to this point as I'm talking to you as a senior going into this final year of high school?
Yeah, I think one thing as a freshman and sophomore is just I was just going out there and having fun, trying to make a name for myself. And I think that led to a lot of success early on. And then, but I mean, as you've seen, everyone's getting faster and faster as the years go on, and guys are running 13:30 for 3 miles, and you're like, holy smokes. But I think that's helped me a ton because I've had experiences that I don't think many other kids have had before. and I've learned a lot of things throughout the years. Like, for example, my freshman year at running lane was the year that Colin Solomon ran 14:04 or whatever, like 14:02. And I remember being in that race, and I went out in 4:35, which at the time was my mile PR. And I was like, holy smokes, like, I just went out in 4:35. Now, granted, I completely blew up, but I learned how to race in super high stake races with huge fields and like top level talent, which I think was like pretty awesome because now I can go into races, for example, like Footlocker last year, where I have experience racing some top guys, but I'm calm. I'm not like freaking out, nervous, and I just know how to compete. So I think that's been super helpful.
Speaking of that Foot Locker race last year, can you take me through it? Ninth place finish. I think you were you're going to be the third top returner this year. So one of the top guys in the nation who wasn't a senior last year, first team All-American, I believe. Take me through that race and that event and that experience, what it was like to really go to like your first national class high school event.
It was, I mean, to this day, it's been the best race I've ever run. It was such a fun atmosphere. I love the whole Foot Locker vibe where there's 40 girls, 40 boys. You get to know everyone super well. And I mean, I don't know if it was the reason I was able to like choose so quickly to go to Notre Dame, just because I'd gotten to know those Notre Dame boys so well. But I think just the small like size that like individuals there was super beneficial because you like I mean you meet people who you're going to be friends with for a long time and even potential teammates. But I think from the race side, like it was so amazing. Like I love that course. The guys there are like obviously top notch guys like Drew Griffith, Ryan Pajak, Patrick Kuhn. Like all those guys are phenomenal athletes. So just to be able to go out there and race them was like such an amazing experience.
I grew up in Ohio, so I'm Midwest, or as we call it, Midbest biased. But what's it like representing the Midwest? And let's address the elephant in the room. Colorado, is it Midwest? Do you claim Midwest?
I mean, I don't know. Like I feel like we're definitely West, but I mean, being in the Midwest is, I mean, I don't know. I'm blessed because I remember finishing the regional race last year. Every single one of those boys that qualified were like, "It's about the team. It's about the team. It's about the team." No one was like, "All right, like I'm gonna beat you at nationals. I'm gonna beat you, or I'm gonna go for the individual win." It was all like, "How can we bring one home for the Midwest?" And I think that's super special. Just hearing that vibe, and I mean, it brought good vibes for the rest of the season just because you had a bunch of guys who were all looking forward to racing with each other rather than against each other. And I know like we got there and we all like kind of congregated at a table for dinner the first night. Like we all sat together. Like we didn't really intermingle with as many guys yet because we were like, all right, like we're gonna try and win this race. Like this is Midwest on top.
You mentioned the team aspect. You made the national meet after regionals, and the other 9 guys who made the national meet as well. We're talking about the team, taking one home for the boys. You look throughout the years, Midwest almost always wins. Last year, South kind of came out of nowhere, had a dominant showing. How do we feel about our chances this year as a Midwest region, bringing one home?
I think we're gonna be really good. I don't know who's gonna come back for Fall Locker, but if everyone that went there last year is coming back, I think we're going to be really, really strong. I mean, you look at Ben, you look at Juan, and those guys have already run really, really quick this season. And, I mean, I'd love to be teammates with them again on Midwest, come back, hopefully take the dub this time. I mean, I'm friends with some of those South boys, but, I mean, I really think we got to take this one home.
I mentioned a minute ago, you're the number 3 returner. When you mention top 3, top 5, even top 10, like you immediately the win comes across your brain because the difference between third and first is 2 places. How much has that win come across your head, and what do you feel like it's going to take to win one this year?
I mean, it comes up every single day. It's like something I'm always thinking about in training. I mean, there are days where I'm like, man, I really don't want to go to practice today, or I really don't want to run. But then in the back of my head, I'm like, all right, like I'm going to go do this because every single day is going to pay off, and hopefully I can come back, win the national championships, because I think that would just be a phenomenal experience. And I think really it's just got to take consistent training. I think that's the biggest part, is just showing up every single day, staying healthy, because at this day and age, everyone's doing the same training. So as long as you can put the work in consistently and you can stay healthy, I think that'll give you an advantage over everyone else.
As much as you're willing to share, what does a general week of training look like for you, Sunday through Saturday? A week in October. What are you doing most weeks?
Yeah, I mean, we usually run 9 days a week. I'm running every single day, as I have been this whole season. And it's pretty standard. I mean, we do a long run on Mondays, which is I don't know, not many people do that. It's usually Saturday or Sunday, but we like those Monday long runs, so then we can still race hard on Saturday, take Sunday as an easy day, and then come back, run a hard long run on Monday. Tuesday is just usually easy running, and then Wednesdays are usually our workout day. I don't know, right now we're just doing threshold, just building strength again. Just because for cross, you don't need a ton of speed right now. And then Thursday, again, is just an easy day. We'll usually double Tuesday, Thursday. And then Friday, another easy day. And then Saturday, we'll either race or we'll hit a hard workout in the morning. And then Sunday is just super slow, super easy. Just making sure we can get some active recovery in.
You mentioned you run 9 days a week. Generally, what does that mileage come out to be most weeks?
It's really just around 55 to 60. I'm not a super high mileage guy. I know some guys are running 75, 80 right now, which I think is kind of crazy. My coach is like very, very smart in developing athletes. As a freshman, I was running 30 miles a week. As a sophomore, I was 40. As a junior, I was 50. And then now as a senior, it's 55 to 60, just so we can hopefully have a smooth transition going into college with still leaving enough room to develop and get better as the college years go on. And I think, I don't know, we're not doing too much right now, which is good.
One of the most impressive results I feel like on paper all across the country was your run at Liberty Bell, where you ran 14:49, which I believe is at elevation. You can spill the tea here in your response. What did that race do for your confidence? And can you just speak to, and we talked about this kind of earlier on in the episode, but recircling back on it, your undefeated season thus far, like how much confidence do you have as we're going into the, final stretch leading into the regional meet and the national meet?
Yeah, I actually have a ton with me right now. And a lot of that does come from that Liberty Bell race. So, I mean, I'm not trying to downplay it, but I did have a little sickness going into the race, and I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. And I kind of just shoved it in the back of my mind, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to go race like nothing ever happened. And I know there were some really elite athletes in that field, and I was like, all right, like I really have to just not let this get to me mentally and just focus on the run-in. And coming away with the win, running the same time that I did last year brings a ton of confidence for me. And this circles back to the whole breathing thing. As I was like, at the beginning of the summer, I didn't know whether or not I was going to be able to run as super fast as cross country season. And for me to be in the same exact place that I was last year as a junior, winning this race while being sick, I think that brought like so much confidence to me, just knowing that I'm going to get better every single week. So, I mean, it was super great to be able to win that.
Take me through, it's October 10th as of recording this. Take me through your plan from now all the way up to Kenosha. And what are some things you want to do differently in year 2 of running Footlocker as opposed to year 1, that preparation leading into the regional meet and then national meet?
Yeah, one thing that am just going to change is just being healthy. I mean, from now on, I've got right around a week until my league meet in Colorado. And then after that, we have our regional championships next week. And then a week and a half later, we have our state meet on November 2nd. And then we've got a little break until the NXR regional meet, which we always go to as a team every single year. And then a week after that was Kenosha. But I think one thing I'm going to do is just try and sleep as much as I can, eat as much as I can so I can stay healthy. I know one thing last year that really, I don't know if it took away from my potential, but I just don't know how well I could have given the fact that I was sick. So my NXR last year, I found out that I had pneumonia a few days before, and I was going to the race again, just trying to ignore the fact that I was sick, just go out there and like kind of get the mental part out of it. And that can only go so far. So I ended up fading pretty hard with about a K to go. I think I was fourth, like running right next to Danny Simmons, which I thought was pretty sweet at the time. There's a pretty cool picture of him and I next to each other. I'm like, this is like so cool. But then I remember finishing that race and I was pretty bummed. And I was like, all right, like I'm going to go to Footlocker and just go see what I can do, see if I can qualify. And I ended up qualifying, which is super exciting. But I think if I can just stay healthy this time, I think I'll be able to transition smoothly. Going into Footlocker, I'll be able to have good recovery so that in the event that I end up racing NXR, NXN, Footlocker Regionals, and Footlocker, that it'll just be a lot easier to get through those 4 weeks rather than just grinding every single weekend.
What's your take on Balboa Park as someone who's done it? It's my opinion. The course is a little overhyped. I think a lot of kids say it's one of the hardest courses in the country. I really don't think that's the case. And putting some perspective here, another question. So, takes on Balboa Park, as well as do you think the Kenosha course is harder than Balboa Park? Because I think there could be an argument there.
Well, I do think Balboa Park is pretty hard. Though I don't know if it's one of the hardest courses in the country. But I think one thing that actually translates pretty well is just being a trail runner. Because going up that one hill, like a mile in, 4K in, I have never really thought that hill was that tough. Like people are always like, it's the toughest hill you're ever gonna race on. And I was like, I remember going up it the day before, and I was like, all right, like it's steep. Like don't get me wrong, but I didn't think it was that tough. And I remember actually going in the race and. Like the first time up was like super easy. Like I felt like I was just flying up that thing and it didn't really take much out of me. And actually the second time was when I ended up gaining a bunch of ground on the lead pack because I was like, wow, like this hill helps a ton. But for every uphill there's a downhill. So I think that's where it's like I don't know how hard Balboa is because you go up the steep hill and then you got a super steep downhill too and then it's flat. So, but I do think the Kenosha course is easier than Balboa only because you go up the big hill for 1,200 meters and then you come down for the rest of the race. Which I think is like, if you can just get up the first hill pretty easily, then you're set for the race, which is nice.
Benji, wrapping up this conversation here, for those who have listened to this conversation, look up to you and want to achieve some of the things that you have already done so in your high school career, what would be some pieces of advice to that individual who wants to chase after greatness within the sport of running?
Yeah, I think as you get older and as you get better, the pressure just gets stronger and stronger. So as long as you can remain calm and just have fun with it, I think that's the most important thing. If you're not having fun, really, what's your point in doing it? Because again, you're just running in high school, you're running in middle school, and even in college. Like if it feels like a job, then you're doing too much. So as long as you can just have fun, I think that's the most important thing.
Benji, love this one. Wrapping it up, the final question I ask every single guest on every single episode: if you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you choose to make for him?
Whew. I think we're gonna have breakfast for dinner if Gordon Ramsay comes over. I think
Okay.
one thing that I would say I'm pretty good at cooking is eggs. Ever since I was a little kid, I was always asking my dad. I was like, "Hey, like, can you make me an egg sandwich with some bacon and some like cheese and stuff?" And as I've gotten older, I've learned to make it myself pretty well. I mean, I'm pretty biased because I do make it, but I think it's one of the best breakfasts I've ever had. So I think I'd make him an egg sandwich with some bacon, some cheese, throw it on a bagel, and call it good.
I love it. Benji, really appreciate the conversation, you sharing your insights from your successful career and ambitions for the rest of the season. Excited to see you chop it up both honestly, the rest of the season. You're going to kill it, man, and excited to see it all go down. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much.